Alrighty, so today we're going to be talking about something that, well, I haven't seen a lot of people talking about. And it's a very interesting discussion to have because while this situation might not affect you right now, it can potentially impact you in the future. Because usually when these things sort of happen, they tend to happen in waves in certain regions. And then next thing you know, it is impacting you. And now all of a sudden you care about it. So I'm trying to give you the information before it hits you, maybe directly, unless you do live in a Latin American country that we'll talk about in just a second, and see how you could kind of prepare for this and, of course, try to figure out why. Because Nintendo has quietly actually raised the price of Nintendo Switch Online in certain countries. So we're going to talk about the countries that are impacted from this, what sort of price increase there was, and kind of talk about why this is happening. Because, I mean, really, there's two different ways to think about it. And I don't necessarily think that one way is more correct than the other way, but it is something worth exploring both of these different options. So in January of 2025, so just a few days ago, there were some price increases to Nintendo Switch Online in the following countries: Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. And these price increases were actually pretty substantial in certain regions. In Brazil, the basic Nintendo Switch Online plan increased by 20%. The Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pack individual membership increased by 14%. And by far the largest increase was the Nintendo Switch Online family membership in Brazil increased by 25%. So those are sizable increases, especially when you consider that Nintendo Switch Online and Nintendo Switch expansion packs aren't necessarily like super cheap. I guess Nintendo Switch Online in and of itself isn't too expensive, but once you start to get into things like the expansion packs and of course the family memberships, those are already a bit of a higher price point. Those are already something that are indeed more expensive than the baseline entry. So to see those also increase and the family memberships increase by 25% is pretty startling, honestly. We had a viewer, CMDR, shout out to CMDR, longtime viewer of all the channels I seem to be involved with, who actually lives in Mexico, and this impacted him. We talked about it on Game and Talk the other day on this previous Wednesday, and he was in the comment section, and he let us know that yes, in Mexico, this has already hit, and it's already something that is impacting people. Now, obviously, if you've already, re-upped your subscription, you're not going to be charged more for it. It's just for having to get a subscription after the day that the price increase went up, and of course for people getting into the Nintendo Switch Online ecosystem as a fresh start. So when you start to see a price increase in a certain region and in certain different regions, there's really kind of two different mentalities to have with this, because there's it's either one of two things that are happening. The first thing, and the thing that most people will kind of gravitate towards, is just the fact that it is adjusting for some sort of inflation. Now, I'm not an economic expert. I am an economic expert when it comes to me and RGT 85, but as far as a worldwide look, kind of goes with that, I don't really know much about it. I can't really weigh in too much on different, economies and how much things cost and cost comparisons and, what are we basing this on? Are we basing this on the Japanese price of Nintendo Switch Online or the North American price of Nintendo Switch Online, where there are more North American users of Switch Online than in Japanese? Are we just trying to make things a bit more balanced in all of the regions as far as worldwide inflation is concerned? And that could be the case. That could indeed be the case with this sort of situation. But as someone who's a bit more of a pessimist when it comes to things like this, I think that the other option is probably the more, realistic option, because these companies are companies. They exist to make money. And yes, the byproduct of that is making you, as the consumer, happy. But at the end of the day, these companies want to make money and they want to increase the price of things. So if you start out a price rollout of subscription services in just certain regions with an increase to kind of see how it goes. Then you start to roll that out into other regions as well. And once we start to talk about other regions, then, you know, this might not hit very close to home for you if you don't live in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Mexico, or Peru. But if you do live in an area that ends up getting a price increase, then, you know, what happens? You are now affected by it. So now you automatically care. And I could kind of see this as a potential rollout for increases in price in Nintendo Switch Online, especially considering when you look at Switch Online versus Xbox Live and PlayStation Network, Switch Online is cheaper. Now, you don't get as many features when it comes to that, but it is cheaper in comparison to the other companies. But here's kind of my thing about this. You know, my kind of mindset goes into, well, the timing of this is very interesting because you have a new console on the horizon with the Nintendo Switch 2, and you just happen to be raising Switch Online prices now, right before you're about to unveil this new console. So is there going to be potentially a price increase for Nintendo Switch Online on the Nintendo Switch 2? That's something that's already been rumored. We've heard about that before these price increases hit these specific regions. And the whole thing with the price increase to me is, if you're giving me additional value, then I don't necessarily mind the price increase. If you're giving me more things, more features, more games. I mean, when you look at how NSO has been distributing the retro games, like, it hasn't been great lately. Like, it hasn't. It seems like we're scraping the bottom of the barrel with some of these titles. We did just get Ridge Racer 64 on Nintendo 64 for the expansion pack, and that's actually a super fun game. And it's a game that looks and plays really, really well on the Nintendo Switch with the, you know, upscaled resolution and stuff like that. It's a very clean looking game, and of course it has 4-player multiplayer and stuff like that. But if you're dramatically increasing the price of things, you know, upwards of 25%, you have to give additional value to that. And you would expect there to be something for Nintendo Switch Online for the Switch 2 that can also be utilized as a way to want to get people to upgrade by potentially adding in another system that's just exclusive to that. We've seen them kind of do that before with the new 3DS, where you had Super Nintendo games where allegedly the standard 3DS couldn't run it, but I mean, it probably could. It probably would not have been a big enough deal. But hey, you know what? You got something extra with the new 3DS. So I think an increase, as long as value is added to the service, isn't necessarily a bad thing. But it seems like NSO has just kind of been in this weird little rut. Like, where's DLC for additional games? That was something that you actually did differently than the other companies with, like, the Mario Kart DLC, the Animal Crossing DLC. And then it just seemed like, well, we kind of stopped doing that. We kind of stopped offering DLC for these games, so now we don't have to put it onto Nintendo Switch Online. I think if you want it to get bigger and better, you might have to increase the price, but you also have to increase the value for the consumer. And while this situation, you know, it might not affect you right now, you're sitting in Kentucky, you know, just hanging out, having a brew on a Saturday afternoon, and you're like, hey, my Switch Online has not gone up in price, but what if it were to? And if it did, would you want that additional value? Look at what happened with PSN, man. Like, they went crazy with the prices, and they didn't really add in too much value, or at least perceived value, for consumers. So it's a very delicate balance. It's something that you have to weigh the pros and the cons. And if you are doing a price increase, there needs to be a justification, not only from your business perspective, but from the consumer perspective as well. Because, well, it's not like Nintendo is hurting for money. They're doing quite well in terms of money right now. So, you know, you got to have something for the consumer. But this is something I just thought to be is very interesting. You know, are they trying to level the playing field. Like I said, I'm not a world economist person or anything like that. So, maybe this is just bringing it more up to status quo with other regions, or is there something bigger going on and the timing of this alluding to that? Which I think is a more reasonable explanation. Let me know what you think of all of this in the comments section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Leave me your thoughts. Hit the bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Oh, go check out Analog Allies on the second channel. That podcast is doing really good. People seem to like it. I'll have a link to it in the description box down below. Later.